Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to GhostMap webinar series this afternoon. Before we get started, let me introduce myself as the MC for today. I am Danish Daniel from GhostMap. Our topic for today is how to benefit from ESG. But firstly, I would like to find out if everyone here with us today knows about ESG. So the simple question I would like to ask is, what does ESG stand for? With that, I already display a poll question on the screen here, so you may select the answer for what you think ESG stands for. Okay, so far we have 100% on environmental, social, and governance, which is correct. Thank you for your responses. It seems that most of you already are familiar with what ESG is, or at least what it stands for. So ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance, and it refers to the three key factors when measuring the sustainability and ethical impact of an investment in a business or company. Most socially responsible investors check companies out using ESG criteria to screen investments. That is just the general definition of it, but I'm sure we will get to understand it at the deeper level during the sharing session, as well as learning how to benefit from it. Before we kick off with our presenters today, I would like to give a few quick reminders on our rules and regulations so that we could learn and enjoy today's webinar without many interruptions. Firstly, please remember to mute your mic when you are not asking questions, so that your secrets are not being heard by all of us. In case you are unsure on how to use the mute function, do not worry. Our team can also help you to mute. Secondly, kindly check your microphone and speaker setting in case if you cannot hear our presenter's voice. You can check on the More option button with three horizontal dots, which is located in between the chat button and the cross button in red. Or else, if you cannot sort the problem, you can directly drop a message in our chat box, and our technical team will guide you. Thirdly, this is completely optional, but you may feel free to turn on your cameras to actively participate, especially during the Q&A session that we will have after our presenters are done sharing the session. Lastly, please show your love and encouragement to our presenters who work very hard to prepare this webinar especially for you, which you can do by following the rules and actively participating throughout this session. Next, we would like to invite all the participants to join on our Global Biz Network, GBN group on Telegram. We will provide the invitation link in the chat and the QR code on the screen here for you to scan and join in our Global Biz Network GBN Telegram group. The main objective of the GBN Telegram group is to, number one, allow us to network and connect with each other, explore business opportunities, and essentially to learn from each other. Number two, and also get access to webinar session links, resources, and support. Number three, as well as the material of presentation and the webinar session recording link will all be shared to the GBN Telegram group. Number four, additionally, you may get information for our upcoming events and webinar session in the future, such as this one today. For those future events or webinars, it is usually held to learn about the latest trend and opportunities, which can really benefit everyone. So kindly join us in our Global Biz Network GBN Telegram group for the updates. If you wish to join but have not installed the Telegram app, don't worry, you may install it now, and we will show the QR code again before we end the session today. Or you can also find the link in the chat as well. Without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker and special guest for today, Ms. Shakila Rajendra. Ms. Shakila is the founder and principal sustainability consultant of Sense and Sustainability Solution, which provide ESG reporting services to clients in Malaysia and abroad. She is currently at as country associate for the UK PAT program, which involved in the disbursement of climate-related funds on the behalf of the UK government. She was the head of sustainability as Synergies Southeast Asia, who established its external ESG reporting framework and produced its first sustainability report. Under her leadership in sustainability, Synergy had won the Best SME at Sustainable Business Award Malaysia in 2018. She has a history of 16 years working in industries spanning sustainability, risk advisory, clean energy and renewables, publication, media and communication, conservation, and climate change policy. She believed in making an impact through focused communication and storytelling on sustainability-related issues. She has a master's degree in global energy and climate policy and a bachelor degree in creative writing and English literature. Next, I will also introduce second speaker and special guest for today, Ms. Lijin Chin, who we have had as our speaker before for our previous webinar. Ms. Chin is the senior managing partner of ACMF Circular Economy that provides advisory services and supports companies to identify and monetize circular economy value and transition profitably. She is also the founding chairperson for the Circular Business Association. She is a Schmidt MacArthur Fellow for Circular Economy since 2016 and has 10 years experience in research and management, consulting mainly for the Malaysian government and multilateral organization. Her project involvement include the Sustainable Development Goals, climate change, nature-based tourism, solid waste management, orang asli and migrant worker, and many more. She has a master's degree in environmental economics and a science degree in ecology. With that, I will pass the stage to Ms. Shakila and Ms. Chin so they can share the topic with us for today. Please give some online claps for our wonderful speakers. So without further ado, I will be inviting our speaker, Ms. Lijin, to take over.
Thank you very much, Danish. It's a very good afternoon to all of you. My name is Lijin. Thank you for having me here today. I'd like to start off by asking you all two questions. First, how many of you would love to make a piece of $1 trillion while saving the world, people, and planet alike? And how many of you would love to leave a positive legacy in this world while making that part of $1 trillion? Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to share with you that these are not pipe dreams. In fact, we are perfectly positioned in time to be the generation that will deliver that. We are actually facing a once-in-a-generation opportunity, a chance that can make them big money and a chance to save the world. We are already at the doorstep of this global reset, and as many previous world-changing events such as the dot-com and digital eras or the emergence of civil aviation, this change will be ruthless in its replacement of businesses who fail to keep up, yet handsomely rewarding those who are ready to claim their piece of the pie. Welcome to the big reset underpinned by sustainability and the climate crisis. And I think the Bursa Malaysia chairman, Tan Sri Abdul Wahid Omar, really sums it up quite nicely on why this change in ESG expectation is something of concern for many companies, when he mentioned that companies that choose to ignore ESG considerations will not be sustainable because they will be deprived of both equity debt to finance their equity and debt to finance their projects. Not only will they need to pay higher insurance premiums to underwrite some of their risks, but will also have difficulty in recruiting talents to their business and be unable to be part of the global supply chain as customers become more discerning in buying sustainable products. Now, with this type of news, how many of you's first reaction would be, oh no, this is another cost to manage, or this is another risk to manage? Now, you don't have to tell me, you know what your own reaction was, or perhaps the reaction of the people in your business will be. In any case, thank you for thinking about that first reaction. But what if you could benefit from ESG and that more than covered the cost? If we take Tan Sri Abdul Wahid Omar's mention as some indication of the benefit from ESG could mean, just humor me for a few seconds here. Try and imagine how you would feel when your business is one of those where equity and debt is offered and piled onto you without you even needing to ask badly for it. How would you feel if your business is rewarded, such as through insurance premiums because you can manage your risk better, or is flooded with talent who want to work for you without you even needing to fight for them? What about when your business is securely part of the global supply chain, where customers come to you and want you to supply to them? What if you were able to do all of that and still make a part of $1 trillion? How would you feel to be part of that business? Now, we are really starting to see some signs of this changing winds. As you can see in this news article by Reuters, 2021 became the year of ESG investing. Just looking at ESG-focused funds, there was an increase of $649 billion flowing into ESG-related funds. And earlier this year, there was also another report about the bond market, green bonds market itself also growing by 500 billion in 2021 alone. These are actually bringing sustainability-linked bonds and green issuance to about $1.5 trillion globally. And on the talent front, there's already a war for talent, and the battles of talent at every level can be quite costly to a company. According to this Forbes article, the constant churn of hiring, onboarding, and resigning is really resourceful, draining, and expensive for companies. According to Gallup, an organization of about 100 employees can expect a replacement cost to be between $660,000 to $2.6 million annually. How is your organization prepared for that kind of amount to hit your bottom line? And if you think that's not enough, let's have a look at some of these statistics that was reported in this article called The Power of Purpose, where 64% of millennials won't take a job if their employee doesn't have a strong CSR policy, and 83% would be more loyal to a company that helps them contribute to social and environmental issues. Also, a study by Weedspire found that the Gen Z, which is going to make up more and more percentage of the workforce in the coming years, is actually the first generation to really prioritize purpose over salary. And before attending interviews, actually look up their employer's values as well as their sustainability mandates. And as for being part of the global supply chain, you can see from this press release by Standard Chartered Bank that for Malaysian-based suppliers who are unable to catch up with the MNCs who are planning to transition to a more carbon neutral sort of world, they are actually risking $65 billion in exports. But the reward is $1.6 trillion in market opportunity. So this is therefore a really timely time for us to really discuss this topic of how to benefit from ESG. So hello, everyone. My name is Li Chin, and I know you heard my introduction just now, but I'm really happy to be here with you today, and even more pleased to have my friend and my colleague, who is Principal Sustainability Consultant of Sense and Sustainability Solutions, Ms. Shakila Rajendra, to discuss this topic. Ms. Shakila will bring us a wealth of experience relating to ESG in a wider context to this talk, while I will be drawing your attention to a key tool or pathway, which is the circular economy, which has in recent times really exploded in its recognition for its role to deliver on a sustainable future, and should definitely be a consideration in your ESG journey itself. So please allow me just a few minutes to introduce my organization before we move on with the discussion today. As Danish mentioned, we will, after 2 presentations, have a short moderated discussion, and then I hope that will softly lead into a Q&A session with all of you in the audience. So if you have any questions, please start putting it into the chat box, and we will try and incorporate that as we go along. In any case, ACMF Circular Economy is part of ACMF Advisory Senior Head. It's a business unit at the moment. And we subscribe, therefore, to the belief that we can create a better world for everyone by building synergistic collaboration between business owners, investors, regulators, and talents. We believe that business is an important vehicle in people's lives. Not only shapes how we live, it supports people's livelihoods, and it can do a lot of good and a lot of harm at the same time. We strive to actually leave our legacy in solving the taxi driver syndrome, solving pains of the climate crisis, and also using business to improve world peace and preventing world war by continuing this conversation towards synergistic benefits for everyone. So ACMF Circular Economy is a business unit under ACMF Advisory, which is a consultancy actually with core strengths in private fundraising readiness. We were added in Q4 2020 in order to complete the mandate to solve the climate crisis. Now we provide circular economy business transformation, certification consulting services, and support companies to identify and monetize circular economy revenue. We worked with clients who need circular economy solutions by first understanding their pains, architecturing the solutions, and then bringing the right people together to deliver those solutions. So while we may not be the domain expert in your respective verticals, what we do is to support our clients to ensure that they can transition profitably to the circular economy and make sure that their mandate in sustainability is sort of compliant towards the circular economy trends that we see today. So some of the talents we have in ACMF Circular Economy includes backgrounds in environmental economics, ecology, and among us, which is myself, there is the Smith MacArthur Fellow. I'm not sure how many of you know of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, but they are the leading charity and the main driver of the circular economy push globally that has produced insights, analysis, tools, learning material, and really promoted a lot of conversation and collaboration between businesses as well as governments. As you can see here, there are a number of big companies who are their strategic partners by invitation, and they are continuing to move the circular economy agenda quickly ahead. Apart from that, our talents at ACMF Circular Economy have also had exposures to solid waste management plans from municipal councils, the National Sustainable Development Goals Voluntary Review, as well as action plans for the bottom 40% households, and nature-based tourism study potential, the synthesis report on the study of economics of climate change in Malaysia, mainly looking at the energy sector, as well as solid waste composition and recycling practices in Malaysia. But of course, we also have access to talents among my colleagues at ACMF Advisory who do private fundraising. And while a lot of the projects are based in Southeast Asia, the investors that my colleagues deal with cover investors from Asia, Europe, and Northern America. And just to give you some examples, ACMF Advisory has actually conducted a number of talks with capital market regulators in Malaysia, such as Bursa, Indonesia IDX, the Singapore Exchange, and also the Hainanese government in China on the investment architecture for Sanya. So thank you for letting me introduce my organization. Without further ado, I would like to invite our guest tonight, Ms. Shakila, to the floor. A warm welcome to you, Shakila. We've heard, We've heard the introduction just now, and we've jumped straight in. I think just now from the poll, we saw that everyone actually is quite familiar with the terms ESG. But I'm sure there's quite a bit of confusion here between the terms sustainability, ESG, CSR. And also there's been like some people saying ESG has weakened, or some people saying ESG has strengthened after the pandemic. So has that actually been the case? What are your thoughts about this?
That's actually the introduction to my presentation in a minute. I will answer all those questions. All the acronyms flying around: CSR, ESG, sustainability, GRI, PRI. There's just too many of them to list. So I'll go through them slowly and also make sure that everyone gets a wide overview of what it means to be in the ESG space and what it means to try and start your journey as well in understanding and how it's contributing to your business. To your second question of whether it's a timely time, I really believe so. We are at the crux of a major change in business and incorporating sustainability values. So if you allow me to just share my screen, I will get into my topics today. Just give me 1 second. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay, cool. So thank you for having me today. I'm really pleased to be participating in this. Lijian and I have been friends for a long time, and we've been talking about this topic at length for a very long time, and it's very interesting to see so many people who are interested in it. I tend to speak very fast, so bear with me. If you need me to slow down, just ping me, or also just make a note of the themes that I'm discussing that you would like to discuss later in the moderated discussion. So how many times have you heard this acronym ESG and have confused it what it really means and who should be managing matters related to this topic? What exactly is encompassed in the E, what's encompassed in the S, and what's encompassed in the G? How should you incorporate this into your business, your investments, even your projects? I'll endeavor today to give you the big picture on this growing industry that's estimated actually to be worth $40 trillion. Yes, you heard that right, $40 trillion. And to ease you into having a clearer understanding of the various terms that are driving sustainability in business. So everybody answered correctly in the poll today. So ESG, what are these factors? They're actually non-financial factors as part of the analysis process to identify material risks and growth opportunities within a business. People are now increasingly expecting companies, investors, and projects to behave and spend money in an environmentally responsible and ethical way. And also to top that off with good governance and transparent practices. ESG components have moved into the mainstream over the past decade, and particularly in the last 3 years. More on that a little bit later. So the ESG criteria as a framework to screen investments or to assess risk in investment decision-making. What do the E, the S, and the G stand for? Typically, the E stands for environmental factors, determining a company's stewardship of environmental and focus on waste, pollution, resource depletion, GHG, greenhouse gas emissions, deforestation, and ultimately climate change. What does the S stand for? The social factors look at how a company treats people and focuses on employee relations, diversity, working conditions, local communities, health and safety, and conflict. What does the G stand for? Sorry, I think I'm getting a little bit of feedback from someone's mic. So the G factor takes a look at corporate policies, transparency, and how a company is ultimately governed. Why has it emerged as a hot topic? Everyone's talking about ESG these days. I said before that it's become an increasingly sought after topic and in the mainstream, particularly in the last decade and even more so in the last 3 years. Why? The COVID-19 pandemic, of course, is a clear example of how unmitigating future risks could cripple businesses. It's also a precedent for other future risks that might emerge if we don't start to plan for the overarching issue of climate change. So has the pandemic even strengthened ESG? It can be said that the pandemic has spurred a growth in ESG matters. In other words, ESG matters, in other words, sustainable practices, ethical and transparent focus. So things that go beyond financial benefits. As the pandemic brought to surface an unprecedented crisis, it's also gained greater importance among investors, policymakers, and other key stakeholders because it is seen as a way to safeguard businesses from future risks. It catalyzed the importance of many issues, bringing to the fore the need for companies to have a wider consciousness and renewing the social contract between businesses and ultimately the community. You would remember in the early days of the pandemic, acts of altruism and support to the most vulnerable communities really positively enhanced the reputations of many businesses. So it's quite clear to see that since the pandemic, it's brought to surface that this non-financial related values will actually really help the reputation of a business and to build towards future proofing as well. Here in Malaysia, it's no different. So ESG has been increasingly on the lips of industry leaders. Bank Islam Chief Economist, Dr. Muhammad Afzanizam Abdul Rashid, commented that it may take a little bit longer for Malaysia to fully comply with the concept, but it's really critical and crucial. He goes on to say that a motivating factor to encourage ESG compliance is that major global investment funds require investee companies now to be free from ESG risks. Hence, companies that do not adopt ESG practices will face a shrinking pool of investors, and worse still, they would be ineligible to be considered for many ESG-only investment funds. To reiterate, it is crucial Malaysian companies play catch-up with ESG compliance and is now being viewed as a major component to assessing your risk profile when it comes to investments. So we'll go back to the question that Legion asked, ESG, CSR, sustainability, what do they all really mean? Essentially, ESG and CSR sit in two pillars on their own. One is strategic and one is philanthropic. While ESG is measurable, it can set targets, it has value creation, and it's a way of managing. CSR is more community-driven, community engagement-driven, self-regulated, and is a qualitative. So what happened was CSR served as a starting point of ESG reporting. While it started as a means to make corporates accountable for their profits and their activities, it slowly became a tool actually that served no more purpose than an add-on to the annual report. So it just became like a nice story to tell. So for many businesses, it became a marketing tool, and it was just an easy way to say that they were doing some good in the world by just simply donating to charities or worthy causes. The danger of this is that it would become associated with greenwashing. I'll talk a little bit more on greenwashing a bit later. So ESG, in contrast, is a criteria-led and requires that these criteria be embedded into the core of business strategy, rather than it's relegated to a communications or marketing tool. The power of ESG reporting lies in the integration into a business and its power to build long-term value above the bottom line. The overall sustainability, therefore, of an operations is dependent on both ESG and CSR working cohesively together. So as you can see, sustainable operations has both of these elements working cohesively together. One is qualitative and one is quantitative. So to reiterate, the three pillars of sustainability of operations is ESG. So environmental, again, talks about impact of resource consumption of any business and looks like carbon footprint and environmental impacting activities. The social looks at how the business interacts with communities where it operates, and also looks at internal policies relating to labor, ethics, diversity, and inclusion. Governance is how you're managing these topics at hand. So it relates to your already internal practices and policies that lead to effective decision-making. It's very importantly that it's also to do with legal compliance. CSR activities sit within mostly the environmental and social pillars. I have added in one more pillar, which is the economic pillar. The E is a silent E. For a lot of people say ESG is actually really EESG. So the silent E for economic relates to economic value of the organization. Good business practice and the upholding of the three pillars will ensure the long-term profitability of the company is upheld and not compromised. I'll give you a few examples in the next slides of how the E pillar can be compromised by not upholding the ESG pillars. ESG facilitates top-line growth in the long run. It attracts talent, reduces costs, and forges a sense of trust among stakeholders. So ESG versus CSR, which is the good investment? Embedding sustainability outcomes or using a recognized ESG framework to drive company development can create a more attractive asset. We already said that improving asset resilience, it safeguards against physical risks of climate change, it minimizes transitional risks, such as the transitional risk of transitioning to a low carbon economy, and it encourages greater productivity and operational efficiencies. In short, while CSR was positioned as a marketing tool or an add-on to an annual report, businesses actually cannot afford to leave ESG behind as CSR, and they cannot, not the same at all. ESG is not nice to have. The question remains, though, what's the cost? Will businesses drawing their focus on ESG have to compromise their profits and returns? Actually, it's been, advocates have said that ESG investment funds are not lower than those of traditional equity funds. The indexes, the MSCI indexes of world ESG leaders from 2019 to 2021, the indexes actually outperformed the traditional MSCI world by 1.84%. At the same time, JP Morgan ESG EMBI Global Diversified Index outperformed the equivalent of its non-ESG index by 1.94%. You may think that's quite little, 1.94%, 1.84%, and it can be argued that outperformance of ESG is starting to diminish and that the gap between ESG companies and normal companies is closing. But you can't say that there's an indicator that ESG is losing traction. We like to believe that that's an indicator that ESG is slowly becoming the status quo. Society is demanding that the topic is recognized by investors and goes beyond just shareholder value. In short, green is good and green should be the norm. So I'm going to take a short moment now to show you a video by McKinsey on how ESG creates value. Just let me know if you can't hear the video.
I think it's really soft, Shakila, the video. The video sound is being very soft at the moment.
Sorry, as you say, it's very soft?
Yeah, Miss Shakila, I think you need to maybe share the sound as well, the computer sound. You can press the share screen button and you should be able to press the share sound at the bottom left corner.
Bottom left corner.
Do you see the share sound?
Hang on, let me just maybe share it again. Bottom left corner. Nope, I don't see it.
You need to take the share sound option.
Okay, is that happening? Can you hear me now?
Yep,
Okay.
we can hear you, but your slide has jumped to the first slide. So
Right.
you'll need to
Oh
locate
dear.
your.
Oh dear.
No worries.
Let me figure this out.
Perhaps in the meantime, while Shakila is trying to figure out the share sound, I'd like to launch
significant growth opportunities.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
Okay, all good.
I heard significant growth opportunities. So maybe you can
Let me
play it
start
for
the
me.
video again.
For example, evidence has shown that ESG can be a win-win for everyone, benefiting. ESG can be a win-win for everyone, benefiting companies, society, the environment, and shareholders. Our research has uncovered 5 major ways that companies can use ESG levers to create value. First, top-line growth. The changing demands of consumers can provide significant growth opportunities. For example, evidence has shown that sustainability marketed products grow 5 times faster than conventional products. Second, cost reduction. Even the most advanced companies often have opportunities to reduce costs along their value chain, from reducing water consumption or packaging materials to saving energy in their logistics operations. Third, regulatory relief. More than 30% of corporate profits can be at risk due to regulatory conventions in some industries if companies make the wrong call on regulatory strategies. However, our research has shown that better relationships between companies and regulators leads to better performance for the company and the community in which it operates. Productivity uplift is next. ESG actions can be a great opportunity to boost employee motivation and attract and retain talent. 80% of Gen Z talent is looking for an employer that is purpose-driven, with potentially 2.8 times improvement in retention if an employee can say they have a purpose in their work. And fifth, investments or capital expenditures. The shift to a low-carbon environment will require huge investments. There are big value-creating opportunities for thoughtful companies. Of course, in some situations, these actions are not optional. Failure to act will lead to a company falling behind competitors and destroying value.
Hello, sorry. I need to reshare my screen. Can everyone see it?
Yep, you need to go in full screen.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so hope you enjoyed that video. Despite the technical the technical hiccups. So what are the risks of ignoring ESG? Now that we've talked about how much value it can create and all the benefits that you can get from it, what are the risks of actually ignoring ESG? Firms with a strong sense of purpose that embed sustainability in their DNA tend to perform well. So index provider MSCI research found that companies with higher ESG ratings are associated with higher profitability and lower tail risk. ESG violations can go viral very quickly and severely hurt the company's branding and customer trust. And this leads to poorer business and financial performance. Consequently, it also decreases investor appetite, and investors are less likely or hesitant to want to invest. So now ESG actually sits in management consultancy firms under their risk management and strategic departments. A US SIF Foundation's report said that at the end of 2019, 1 out of every $3 under professional management services in the United States, that's an amount amounting to $17.1 trillion, was managed in accordance with sustainability metrics. So management consultancies are already embedding this into their service provisions. Long-term goals may not be met if companies retain short-term vision. One of these examples is the example I have on screen. Shell is facing a little bit of a scandal at the moment, as the Shell directors are facing legal action for not upholding their commitments to the Paris Agreement climate commitments. The lawyers from Client Earth, which incidentally are also Shell shareholders, say that they are seeking to hold the oil and gas company 13 directors personally liable for what they consider to be a failure to adequately prepare for the global shift to a low carbon economy. They said that the board has failed to adopt and implement a climate strategy that aligns with the 2015 Paris Agreement, and they claim that these amounts allege to an alleged breach of the directors' duties under the UK Companies Act. So this is a cross between ignoring the environmental commitments as well as the governance commitments, because it's not from the very top level, they're going after the very top level of the directors. Next one. Another example is Toyota. January of 2021, Toyota was hit with a record of 180 million civil penalty for systematically violating the US environmental EPA's emission reporting requirements under the Clean Air Act. They were delayed filing hundreds of reports concerning their emissions-related defects in their vehicles. Toyota is actually a very good example of the topic of greenwashing. Remember, I mentioned that CSR was used as a marketing tool, and it's also the danger of using it as a greenwashing tool. So Toyota has had a long reputation and has fostered an image of environmental responsibility. It's one of the first automakers to introduce hybrid vehicles, and its Prius has become the best-selling hybrid car in the US, and it's also known as a symbol of environmental responsibility. Consequently, its own fleet emissions, and through this scandal, is actually a lot more than whatever that their Prius has been saving in emissions, and it's actually given them the worst results of overall fleet emissions in any car brand. So even if you're doing good work in the social and environmental pillars through CSR, and you leave governance out, the long-term effects can be felt later on. So this is a reporting that's incident and reporting between 2005 and 2015. But even as late as 2021, they haven't really recovered from the scandal of this emissions reporting fraud. Actually, it's a fraud issue. There's another example. Here's another example that we're all quite familiar with. Many companies see ESG as a means of protecting themselves against risk. So it's long-term future-proofing and it's protecting themselves. But then some companies like Top Glove, they were actually forced into compliance with ESG. So Top Glove's plans for ESG were actually really driven by global criticism and reticence to subscribe to their products, buy their products by overseas customers and people down their supply chain. So they declared 2021 as the year of their ESG. So after this scandal that came out, I think in 2020, 2021 was a year of ESG, and they made many commitments to invest, things like investing 201 million ringgit to build houses for their migrant workers, create channels for whistleblowing in their workers' native languages, and ensure greater transparency in the recruitment process. This is a really prime example of how good business practices should be included as and when before a scandal or bad ethical issues disrupt your business and stakeholder trust. So now that we've had a few bad examples, here's a couple of good examples. Companies can benefit from pivoting. So as we said from Top Glove, I think now they've pivoted to doing good things. So transparency is actually key in earning trust in customer feedback. Your customer is now not they are quite, I would say, sophisticated, and they are very familiar with these topics. And actually, smaller businesses have really good opportunities in this pivot. One example of this pivot is Danone, the food manufacturer. They understood that earning customer trust is important because their plastics footprint is one of the largest in the world. But they're very transparent with how they are regearing their supply chain, and they've taken on so many new environmental commitments that show their dedication to delivering customer service. And in fact, that has really affected them positively. Another one that's really, really interesting is Pantagonia. They also took back 45 tons of clothes for recycling for their customers and made 34 tons into new clothes. They also launched the Common Threads initiative that encouraged customers to repair and reuse their clothing rather than disposing of it, returning them for recycling or replacing them once worn out. This initiative sprouted from the idea that recycling is not just the solution, it's actually reducing. So their marketing efforts for the initiative were geared towards encouraging higher quality products with longer shelf lives over those that might wear out quicker. So this is an example of their marketing, which they actually put out an ad to say, don't buy this jacket. They actively discourage their audience to purchase their products. Contrary to what you may think, the outcome was that the campaign was the core of the greatest success the brand has seen in 2 years. The initiative repaired more than 30,000 items in 18 months, and sales increased by 30% to 540 million in just 1 year. So is ESG going to blow over? Is it a passing trend? The answer is a resounding no, because the risk of climate change sets the backdrop for ESG to remain in economic focus. Social impacts resulting from climate change also will risk and affect the economy. And the most socially responsible corporations are soon to be seen as the most financially sustainable. Investment trends agree that ESG is the future of profitability too. BlackRock researchers found that during times the market fell in 2020, ESG indexes fell by less. Specifically, BlackRock showed that 94% of ESG funds it studied beat their parent benchmarks during the volatile first quarter of 2020. You remember that was during the pandemic. The climate crisis is not going to go away, and it will precipitate the need for upholding all the pillars of ESG. And this includes the silent E for economic. Again, we'll look at trends emerging in Malaysia. ESG is not sitting down and being quiet. In his New Year's speech, our Prime Minister has vowed that the country is ready to create an ecosystem that is capable of generating activities and a job market with an economy and society that is ESG friendly. Even this month, the EPF has launched the EPF Sustainable Investment Policy and 2 supplementary policies to guide the fund in making better informed and holistic investment decisions by integrating environmental, social, and governance considerations in its investment management processes. Tengku Zafrul, our minister, noted that he released a statement 2 days ago that it's critical for Malaysia's economic recovery to be anchored in ESG factors and to underpin the 12th Malaysia Plan of revitalizing Malaysia's socio-economic development with long-term sustainability and prosperity serving as the foundation for improving the people's well-being. He says that we are racing against time to mitigate the effects of climate change or other future shocks. Institutional investors can and must assist the government in mainstreaming the sustainability agenda across as many sectors and industry as soon as possible. So it's very encouraging to see that the finance ministry and the financial world are really pulling up their bootstraps and getting into this understanding ESG and climate related risks and including these factors in their assessment of their investments. So this is my final slide. As we go into the topic that Lee Jin's going to be talking about, how do you start your ESG journey? So the ESG pipeline and your approach to ESG is not as daunting as you think it is. It's quite a short 4-step approach. So you'll start with your global goals, and I think we're all already quite familiar with the Paris Agreement, the Sustainable Development Goals, and the Principles of Responsible Investing. Then next step is to understand regulation. BERSA already requires for sustainability reporting for all listed companies. And now they're looking, and they encourage actually non-listed companies as well to start looking at sustainability and ESG reporting start embedding it into their strategy and their business operations. Also look at environmental regulation and policy, anti-corruption mandates, and anything in your supply chain that could disrupt business, and it has to comply with regulation. Then once you understand these overarching focuses, then you start looking at reporting frameworks. The few that are out there that are very well known, the Global Reporting Initiative, the GRI, SASB, and the Task Force on Financial Disclosures, which the financial industry uses quite a lot, as the frameworks to understand how you can start reporting on your operations on the ESG pillars. And then once you've had that and you're comfortable with that process, you can then monitor using ESG indices. BERSA has an ESG index. It's also the FTSE4Good has an ESG index there that has many indicators where you can start to rate your performance of your ESG and start to probably incorporate more of your targets and your goals of your business that's more ESG aligned. So that's all I have today, and the end of my presentation. I'm sure we can approach these themes in the moderated discussion in a bit. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Shakila. So I'll be taking the baton off your end. While I get my slides back on, I guess I want to just launch a poll since we've listened to what Shakila has shared to us. I just wanted to see what the audience actually felt again about the same some of the questions that were discussed just now. So please feel free to answer into the poll questions that I've displayed now. Okay, right. Thank you everyone for your participation. So I'd like to start off with my set of the presentation with this video. I really like how you mentioned, Shakila, that this is not just going to blow over, especially with the climate crisis as the backdrop. And I really want to share this video because I think it hits home about the bigger reason for a need to action.
Some call me nature. Others call me Mother Nature. I've been here for over 4.5 billion years, 22,500 times longer than you. I don't really need people, but people need me. Yes, your future depends on me. When I thrive, you thrive. When I falter, you falter. Or worse. But I've been here for eons. I have fed species greater than you, and I have starved species greater than you. My oceans, my soil, my flowing streams, my forests, they all can take you or leave you. How you choose to live each day, whether you regard or disregard me, doesn't really matter to me. One way or the other. Your actions will determine your fate, not mine. I am nature. I will go on. I am prepared to evolve. Are you?
Oh, every time I watch that video, I get goosebumps. I'm not sure how that video made you feel, but we have to remember that there is this bigger backdrop of the climate crisis looming in the background that's really driving a lot of this ESG surge at the moment. And according to the sort of lead author for the International Panel on Climate Change research, it shows that if we don't cut our emissions by the end of this decade, essentially 1.5 degrees Celsius will be out the window. So we only have about, 7, 8 more years to really avoid the worst of climate change. What it means for 1.5 degrees Celsius to go out the window is that images like this are likely to quadruple by the end of this decade. And as you can see here, it's not just happening in Malaysia, but across the world, be it in Northern America, in Latin America, in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, everywhere. So think of supply chain disruptions, the loss of employment days, the cleanup costs, the asset replacements, etc. I don't think that's something that businesses want in their day-to-day situation. And if you thought that this situation where 4 million people have actually needed to flee their homes because of the Ukraine war, try imagining 3 billion people migrating simply because the place that they live in is no longer habitable because of the climate change. Now, what's scary to me, and I think it really brings up the seriousness of this, is that even if all our governments were to meet their current national determined contributions, we're hardly scratching the surface of the percentage of emissions that we need to cut by 2030, which is 45%. At the moment, even if we met 100% all our commitments, every country in the world, we only are achieving 13.7% reduction. Now, if we look at the COVID pandemic as a teaser for climate crisis, think of the regulatory action that governments were willing to take in order to preserve human life, even at the cost of societal norms or even economy. So in this sense, we can only expect regulatory pressure to actually increase in the coming years, especially with the signing of the Paris Agreement that contains certain legally binding commitments, which means countries can actually get into trouble if they fail to meet their climate commitments. Now, and the challenge to do that is also achieving these while making sure that we achieve other sustainable development goals, such as how do we reduce inequalities or make sure there's economic growth or that there's peace and justice while also facing the threat of the climate crisis. In other words, the Paris Agreement and SDGs are on the radars of governments and regulators, and it's not just going to blow away. Now, but this is also where the $1 trillion will be made. This is where the Kodaks and Nokias of this generation will disappear, and where we will see which businesses actually stand the test of this reset. Of course, it's not just about surviving this changing reset. It's also a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to actually thrive in this adversity and be a force for good change. So what could be done? Now, the good news is, and also the bad news is, that renewable energy will not solve the climate crisis alone. It won't get us there. Contrary to the belief that, and the hyper-focus of the world on electrification and renewable energy, the energy sector is not going to achieve all the emission reductions that we need. In fact, there's 45% of emissions that's embedded in our day-to-day products, how we make, how we use products, and how we deal with those products after. In fact, if we consider all material handling, which includes the energy sector and power sector, 70% of greenhouse gas emissions comes from material handling and use. Secondly, for years, we've been educating and motivating consumers to tackle climate change or any other environmental issues for that matter. We do school programs, bring your own bag program, household recycling program, etc. But in all honesty, when we walk down a shopping aisle, when we make a decision of whether to procure a product or a service, do we really go for environmentally friendly products that are not affordable, or do we go for affordable products that are not environmentally friendly? Now, chances are we go for affordable products that are not environmentally friendly. But this doesn't mean that it's the environmentally friendly products problem per se, because Although we look at the production of the pollution itself, we tend to blame the consumers as being the last point where the pollution sought out, and they should be making the right choice between buying an environmentally friendly product or not. There's actually a lot of decisions already built in for the consumer before they even touch or use the product. And these decisions actually built in the products or service providers, it's in the production processes, it's in the choices of the raw materials that is used, it's even in the ways that we extract those raw materials, etc. So for the past 50 years, we've been penalizing consumers for not being environmentally friendly and guilt-tripping them, and it's not been effective to change our situation. And we don't have that kind of time anymore. We need to change now, and we need to change how the entire economy works. And this is where we actually need to focus a lot more, which is further upstream from the entrepreneurs and the consultants, the inventors, the product designers, the investors, funders, and even the regulators. Essentially, the whole economy needs to change. And it doesn't matter what type of a job you may have, be it an accountant, a lawyer, or even at the operational plant specialist, etc., your jobs will be affected. Because we are trying to move away from this linear economy that can no longer work, where we just take resources, make the products they need, and then we no longer want them or need them, we just dispose them as if they will just disappear. It's one way in the sense that there's no plans for reuse, for recovery, or even the active regeneration of natural systems from which they're taken from. And this actually builds in a lot of cost problems when later on, at the end of the pipe, you're trying to do something like a recycling program or a take-back program, etc. So the circular economy presents a way forward. The question is, why? Now, we've seen a lot of governments actually jump onto the bandwagon, even economic regions embracing the circular economy into their frameworks. It's not just Europe where we're seeing it being driven very strongly, but also even in China and even in ASEAN and Latin America, there's been coalitions in economic regions coming aboard. And it's regulatory and non-regulatory actions that are beginning to be rolled out, and we can see some examples afterwards. Any case, we also see big corporate players starting to push it down their supply chains, and there are more than 30 financial institutions with $18 trillion of assets under management issuing support to make the transition into the circular economy. And at the same time, we're also seeing that sort of regions like Europe actually submitting the Circular Economy Action Plan as their means of delivering on the Sustainable Development Goals. Including China as well, has also been looking at the linkages between circular economy and the SDGs. Also, the United Nations Global Compact, which is the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative, that is actually initiated from the United Nations and has more than 10,000 companies and 3,000 non-business signatories in 160 countries. They actually have issued that the new benchmark, apologies for that, the new benchmark for corporate sustainability already includes circular economy. So why is this the case? This is because the comprehensiveness of the conceptual framework of circular economy itself really forces businesses to make sustainability and ESG every bit of their business right from the start and not as an end of pipe afterthought. It's because the circular economy is about solving the problem in its totality, not in verticals or sectors. It's about ecosystem-based solutions, not standalone solutions. And as of today, the circular economy concept is one of the best tools and pathways that we have to try and create an alternative economic model. Now, the circular economy essentially is defined as an economy that's restorative and regenerative by design. It follows these three principles. First, that it is designed to regenerate natural systems. So imagine if every time we grew our crops, that instead of leaving the soil more barren and needing us to pump in fertilizer and pesticide, it's because we actually had crops being grown there that it enriches the soil, it improves the water table, etc. The second principle is designing out waste and pollution. So if there are materials, if there are chemicals that we can't handle or deal with then can we actually remove them from being used completely? And it's not completely new either. You've seen how we've dealt with the ozone layer issue in the past, where CFCs have really contributed to the ozone hole becoming bigger, and we've actually designed out and phased out more and more of these CFC chemicals from being released and being used even in products. And the third is to keep products and materials in use for as long as possible at its highest value. Essentially to recover a lot more economic value from the products that have already brought to the surface, and see how we can increase the usage of it and therefore reduce the material and carbon intensity of those products. So essentially, the comprehensiveness of the circular economy is about systems thinking. Renewable energy, electrification, carbon capture, just green plastics, these are all just verticals, and it can't solve the environmental challenge or the climate crisis as its whole. For example, where does the materials from batteries of electric cars go after they're finished consumed? How do we process those batteries? Do we use it back, or is it also disposed and therefore leaking into our environment and causing a lot of health issues? Another thing that circular economy really plays an important role in the ESG journey is that there is a need for it to make business sense. Because what's the point if your business model cannot work and the company goes bust in 2-3 years' time? Even if the product is good for the climate crisis or good for society, it's gone now because the business has failed. So I think the circular economy is about very much an ecosystem that needs to be built. It's not just the manufacturers, it's not just the regulators, but actually including even the end users, the service providers, the distributors, the logistics and delivery, talents, investors, the raw material, sort of primary and secondary extractions, the recovery and repurposing, etc. And the result of that is that the circular economy has been estimated to be able to deliver trillions of dollars in rewards to businesses that are able to capture this pain that society is facing today and change it into solutions for the world. Now, just to give you an example, in France, they have actually been debating this new law where 20% of the floor space in their retail sector will be mandated to be converted to refill industry, refill aisles. This is a bid for the government to cut down on their single-use plastic that's generated in France itself, because EU has also passed a law on single-use plastic tax that has been started last year, whereby 8 pence per ton of plastic will be charged to countries that produce single-use plastic. Now, what is then actually done is that because of this slight change, companies such as Algramo from Latin America, as well as Miwa from Czech Republic, where they have been setting up the software and the technology to be able to make these refill stations much more user-friendly and traceable, and using RFID tags, be able to help people actually buy by the gram instead of needing to buy in predefined packaging. They have now actually been able to take advantage and grow very quickly into the scene, even though, and actually benefiting from this growth, even though the laws and regulations haven't been fully implemented yet. And in many instances, we are starting to see that there are regulatory actions being put out. Sustainable batteries, for example, is going to be a major point for Europe, whereby if the batteries are not rechargeable or repairable and you do not have climate disclosure for it, it can't even enter the European market. There's also the tax I mentioned of single-use plastic, as well as the banning of certain plastic products, such as the oxo-degradable plastic, or what people call fake biodegradable plastics, into the European market. Now, of course, no single organization can do this alone. As we demonstrated just now, the circular economy is about ecosystem. So this is where I would like to introduce to you all using procurement, sustainable procurement, as a power tool in order to help companies really get into the circular economy and the ESG journey much faster than before. Now, of course, I don't have enough time to cover all the aspects today, but I'd just like to quickly share on two potential areas that you may want to consider. For example, could you use your procurement strategy to get into a new market without actually compromising your old market? And one example here is Signify, which owns the brand Philips. I'm sure if you bought a light bulb before, you've seen the Philips brand. And traditionally, you would think that Philips just makes money by selling light bulbs. But having decided to embed circular economy thinking into their strategic vision since 2012, they've actually been able to enter a complete new market, which they don't have many competitors in, whereby they're selling light as a service, and therefore be able to contribute to their clients' carbon reduction strategies through lighting and building management, as well as cities' carbon reduction strategies by controlling the lighting that's related to all our street lights and everything. In doing so, they've actually broadened to have another brand called Interact, where you can interact with controlling your lighting system. And on top of that, you don't even need to deal with all the assets that come with lighting in your premises or buildings, because Philips would own those assets and only come in to maintain or even upgrade before the lighting goes up. So this is something that by embracing the circular thinking, Philips or the bigger company Signify has now been able to really get into without really disrupting their old market. At present, 24%, 24% of their revenues are actually made up of circular products. Another example is of Michelin, but I won't go too much into that. Again, it is a product as a service, but because they're delivering this to their customers, they're actually helping their customers to not only improve their fleet productivity and efficiency, but also save costs and also reduce their carbon emissions at the same time. Now, carbon emissions, of course, is something that's gaining a lot of attention at the moment because of this whole thing about carbon tax and credits. So can you actually use your procurement strategy, for example, to earn from carbon credits, or perhaps even reduce your carbon tax commitments? Just to give you a feel of that, the world's largest carbon trading scheme was started in China last year. Indonesia, Malaysia, and many other countries have started announcing that they will be putting cap and trade systems in, as well as carbon taxes. And you can see that since 2020, really the prices of carbon credits have just soared. In Europe, it's up to 50 over euros. And the latest, I think the highest was at 60 euros per ton, as well as in US as well. Now, of course, that's just carbon is just the starting point. If we look at what happened last year in November, China and US actually made a joint commitment to actually deal with methane. So this is likely to be the next pollutant that will be on the radar that businesses need to be careful of. In any case, the financial implications of having a way to solve those key pollutants does have, it can be looked at it in this way. Let's say before you implemented or even procured services from vendors and suppliers who did have those solutions, you may need 10 million carbon credits in order to avoid regulatory action. That costs you $200 million US, for example. But after you actually deploy these strategies, be it a circular strategy within your own organization or by using procurement and working with your ecosystem partners, you manage to reduce your carbon credit needs down to 5 million. Essentially, you saved your company $100 million US. Another example that you may want to look at is Brambles, which has been very important to save carbon emissions for their big clients such as Coca-Cola, Danone, and many other fast-moving consumer goods companies that operate worldwide. In any case, this led to the birth of what we are trying to do, which is the Circular Business Association. Is currently in process of being registered in Malaysia with ROS. And I won't say much further due to the time issues, but I'd like to share this short video with you. Okay, thank you very much for letting me share that. I think at this point, I'd like to call on Shakila actually to rejoin me onto the floor for our moderated discussion. I see there are already something is happening in the chat, but Shakila, I just wanted to start off our moderated discussion, which actually will maybe quite brief, depending on how much time extra we have. But what is ESG fluff? I mean, how do we prevent being a victim of all that ESG fluff?
So I think I touched on it very, very lightly when we're talking about ESG and CSR, actually, and how that relates to a little bit of fluff. Oh, we have a question actually. Does your company help companies establish ESG? I think you'll answer that later. So let me just quickly just talk about ESG fluff. ESG fluff is very closely related to what CSR has become, where CSR was initiated to make companies accountable for their profits and to make sure that they are contributing to environmental and social avenues. But then companies saw that as a way to generate fluff, which was to just donate to any other charity that doesn't have anything related to their business even, or and probably the if it's I can give you an example of a company that I won't mention names, but I've had experience with, where it looked to donate to just like a Rumah Anak Yatim or one of those, but that company had nothing to do with youth or empowering youth. And then we actually came in as a consultant and said, like, well, if you do want to give some kind of benefits to youth, why don't you set up an educational program? Why don't you sort of bring them into looking at how your business operates, because they were manufacturing a product. So and educate the youth instead of just donating to old folks. I mean, orphanage every year, and there's no value creation beyond beyond just giving money away. So that's what fluff has come up, been associated to ESG, where there is no value, there's no, for one of the better word, sustainability, there's no long-term vision, and there's no contribution beyond just giving money away for a short-term goal.
And so this is what we would sort of see in, let's say an annual report, where they have gone straight ahead to do the ESG report without actually considering all these aspects that you were talking about previously. Correct.
So the ESG, they wouldn't call it a ESG report, they call it a sustainability statement. And usually when you see in annual reports, when they have a sustainability statement, it's just that, oh, I have contributed this much to this amount of charities, and that's it. The way we do it every year. But then what value does that bring to the communities? What value does that bring even to your own employees? Because then there's backlash where your own employees may be suffering or have some kind of issues that they are very passionate about, and that doesn't get answered. So that again doesn't contribute doesn't benefit anyone or any one of the ESG pillars as well. Yeah. So
so when companies actually go ahead and let's say outsource out these ESG reports, maybe for like, I don't know, 50,000, 100,000, something like that, without setting up that ESG framework, I mean, how is that actually misspent, or what should they be doing?
I wouldn't be blaming the let's say the consultant or those companies that offer those services to write up the reports, because it's actually the company itself that's already doing something that is almost like the greenwashing. It's just a temporary plaster or on bigger issues that you don't want to address. So there's no real value in that. and you're just doing it out of using it as, again, a marketing tool, or also to do the bare minimum of compliance. I think we mentioned before that there's companies that say, like, you know, I'm already doing so well as I am. So like, why don't I just stick to status quo, because that's how it is, and then and I'll just get a consultant in to write up all the nice stories that I have. Do I have it or don't have it? So a lot of companies actually scramble sometimes to get consultants in to just write you a nice report without looking at your ESG frameworks or ESG value creation. Like I said in my previous slides, ESG is measurable. So it's measurable for a reason. It's there for you to set targets. But CSR, on the other hand, is more it's self-regulated and it's qualitative. So it's really up to the company itself or the business on how they want to generate value. If it's just a short-term goal to make yourself look good, then go ahead. But if you want long-term profits, also investor interest for your future business, then you will look at ESG and then try to incorporate those CSR values into your ESG.
As one of the activities per se.
Yeah. So the goal is to set up an ESG strategy and then incorporate how CSR can bring value into that strategy.
So I guess it links back to Yen Leong's question in the chat there about, does your company help companies to establish ESG? You know, what would it mean to establish ESG? Maybe you can enlighten us a bit there.
So it's actually really understanding what is material to your company, and what is your shared value of your company, of all your stakeholders. So in ESG reporting, there's a way to do it in GRI and all that. They tell you the first thing you must do is get the buy-in from your leaders, and then those that understand your company and its goals the most. And if they are driven towards ESG, then it's very simple. Then you will understand that your company, what is your main drivers for change, and your drivers for change should be anchored in the 3 pillars of ESG. So to start that and how to incorporate that into your business, then you will start to understand what are your main material topics in your business. And if those material topics relate very much to, like I said, the very start with the SDGs, you know, Sustainable Development Goals, low carbon economy kind of principles, those kind of overarching principles, and if they align very well to your business, then you have it already. You have a foundation for setting up your ESG journey.
So it's sort of like companies need to sort of look at this entire ESG, even compliance thing in 2 parts. One is that actually setting up like a framework of sorts, if I understand you correctly.
Yes.
Of how it means and relates to the company, and then how you're measuring it, and how it relates to all the different business functions you have. And then there's the sort of second part where a lot of people are spending money on at the moment, which is the reporting part of it, which is actually writing up what it is you've measured and things.
Yeah. So the 2 parts to it, you're right. Even before the framework is understanding your targets and your goals and your material topics. Material topics really means what is the most important to your company, beyond profit. Profit is always there. That's why I say it's the silent E. But ESG, beyond profit, non-money making, non-financial value, what's important to your company as well. So definitely ESG will be there. Sometimes very much so. Some companies are more geared towards the E, some companies are geared towards the S, but the G has to be very strong. So if you have that, then you go into your framework, and once you set that up, the reporting side actually comes very easily. But what a lot of companies don't understand when they're starting this journey is they think that you can just report on whatever I'm already doing. which is usually not a lot.
And there's more risk of backfiring on them then.
Yes, but I've also seen areas where a company is already doing a lot, but they don't know how to report on it. So that's a good problem to have, because they're already doing a lot and they already have all the systems in place. They just don't know how to bring it together on a cohesive framework, like you mentioned. So that's a good problem to have, because they were saying they actually hired someone to come in and write their report. But then they said, but we understand that to write the report, we need a framework and a systems in place, a strategic thinking. But we just don't know how to pull it all together. So that's when you understand and you build for them a way of managing.
Yeah, so like activities that what your organization is doing actually would also involve some of these things as well. To help build up actually a capacity in the companies to do those ESG related.
Yeah, correct. So it's really to motivate the company and to encourage the company to set up that foundation first. And then the report writing it will come easily. In fact, you don't even, I know this is going to hurt our business, but you don't actually need to hire someone to write it up. Once you have that framework in place, you can do it internally.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many companies in the world, Shakila, and we all need to move so quickly to a much more sustainable path. So I think it's the more accessible it is, the better actually for business as a whole. We have another question, I think somewhat related, so I'll take that first, which is any ISO standards or certification available for ESG compliances?
Yes, so there are ISO standards, but ISO standards are not, they go to compliance within each pillar. So for example, if you want to have an ISO on environmental management, there's one available for that, but there's not one ISO that encompasses all of it. But the certification is GRI, definitely that's there, the Global Reporting Initiative. That one is the most globally recognized sustainability reporting framework. And that's the one that Bursa uses as well for their assessments of sustainability reports. Just one question that came up, I just want to answer it very quickly because I have an interest in energy. From Mr. Steiner Locke has said that nuclear energy is part of ESG. Nuclear energy is part of the transition towards low carbon economy. The problem with nuclear, I studied energy in climate change, but the problem with nuclear is that the governance of countries that want to transition using nuclear is not really there. And like you said before, what happens with batteries, what happens with nuclear waste, it's not circular. So there are technologies that are coming up that are dealing with this, but certainly it's part of the transition of the low carbon economy transition. But I wouldn't be go so far as to say it's part of circular economy just yet.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, Shakila. I think like as any other material, even plastic, right? Essentially, it's not the material problem. It's not the materials problem per se, but it's how we actually use the material and what we do with after. So as you mentioned just now, I mean, what do we do with nuclear waste? And if there's no way for us actually to safely and return it back to the ecosystem, then it's almost like let's say a plaster, very much needed plaster to just get us through that stage. But that plaster is not going to be something that will build into a regenerative and restorative area. So I think from a circular economy perspective, we always have to come back to that three principles. That is it going to be able to regenerate our natural systems and therefore need to return safely to the ecosystem? Can it actually be designed out if we can't handle it at this point in time? Of course, in the future, maybe there's some way we can handle it. So we not completely close the door on nuclear, but at this point in time, can we actually deal with it? And if not, then what are the areas that we want to move into in order to fully utilize that type of material or resources? Right.
One
so
more question,
yeah,
in the chat that talks about, is it possible that the government will come out with something like ESG funds to support those companies which grow and work towards this ESG goal?
can I jump in there first?
Yeah, please.
And you can correct me, I think, Shakila, because you're more of the ESG expert. I think in the 12 Malaysia plan, Mr. Torrance, if you look inside there, there are already a number of economic instruments that the government is introducing to try and help companies make that transition over. Is it called ESG fund? No, but it's actually hidden in various terms. So for example, there's the GITA, which is Green Investment Tax Allowance. So for companies that actually spend money to invest into those green technologies, they will be able to get tax allowances. There's another related one where if your company is producing green technology, then you will get tax allowances. And there's also some productivity related, I think, pioneer status that is going to be applicable if you can deal with certain waste streams within Malaysia that is troublesome at the moment. You will be able to apply for that pioneer status as well. So I would say that look into the 12th Malaysia plan further. If there is interest from the audience, ACMF Circular Economy has previously done a short talk actually on the 12th Malaysia plan and the circular economy, because circular economy has actually been named as a game changer to help not only regenerate the economic growth, but also project Malaysia onto a more sustainable pathway. So perhaps you guys can indicate later to go smack or whatever if you're interested to have that topic discussed, and we can organize it another day. Shakila, maybe you can add your inputs here.
I was just going to say that there are also, if you want to look into climate-related funding, my company actually manages a funding program by the UK government that funds smaller companies that are doing climate-related work. So there is that kind of thing, but I think it's more related to your answer where there are tax incentives. There are also now a lot of investment funds where they are looking at companies that are going green and doing good work. For example, companies that are developing technologies and products that are low carbon or benefiting the community and societies, and they don't operate as NGOs, they operate as profit-making entities. And there are also a lot of, they call it responsible investment funds that look at these companies and are looking to invest in those kind of portfolios.
That said, of course, always keep in mind that, at least from a circular economy perspective, is that it should make business sense. So whatever that you are implementing should actually be able to pay for itself. And all these incentives or tax rebates or things like that is actually a bit of a topping on the top. It's just a topping on the top lah. Yeah, it's not supposed to be the foundation for which you so-called make that transition lah. Of course, Shakila may disagree with me on that.
No, for sure, it should pay for itself. You shouldn't be looking for funding, extra funding or special funding. It should be the norm. Like I said, green is good and green should be the norm. It shouldn't be something that it precipitates extra funding or a special type of goal.
So Shakila, I guess the question that some companies may then have is that if we are going to go on this transformation towards more serious ESG, not just touching the surface, but serious ESG, how do you hire good talent to run this sustainability transformation?
I would say that you wouldn't have to hire in talent. Certainly from my experience, it's really identifying talent that you already have that's motivated towards taking on this aspect of your business and running it. So when we say that, how do I set up a sustainability department? How do I set up an ESG reporting task force? That kind of thing. It really should come from every aspect of your company, and people who understand the financial related values as well. So usually we would like to, in a large company, we would like to see representatives from the finance department, the legal department, the procurement department, and then only all the head of the business units to come in and actually have a task force. You don't need one appointed person that knows everything. You actually need the buy-in of a C-level or a leader that knows your business well, knows what is the direction to drive it, and to have that encouragement to drive a department or representatives from various aspects of your business to run a cohesive task force. That's it, because and usually nowadays like you said, millennials are demanding that companies that you work for are geared towards ESG related matters and take it very seriously. You already said there's a exodus of millennials who just simply don't want to work for companies that don't take ESG. Yeah, they don't take ESG seriously, or they go on and they say the millennial way of thinking is that we'll just start our own business, and that drive the values that we subscribe to. So it's not a question of hiring in new talent or even educating new talent. It's really taking what you have on board and making sure that their values are aligned with your values and to motivate them towards it.
Okay, I will add a little bit more to that, but I see that we're running quite over time already. So I'd like to launch this last poll. I see in the chat there were some people asking for our contact so that they can follow up, etc. So please answer the poll question, and we will. Hello. Yeah.
Yep.
Hello. Yep. Can you hear me? Sorry, I think I got cut off there.
Yep. The poll is showing.
Yep. So if you would like to be in contact with us, please answer the poll questions, and we will try to connect with you through there. Also, I think our contact and things, we will leave it with the host and organizer, GoSmack. So we will follow their procedures in terms of how to disseminate further and be in contact with you all for that. As people are answering the poll question, I guess I would just want to add a bit to what you were saying there, Shakila, that a lot of people think young people need to be convinced actually about this whole sustainability thing, but is that actually the case?
I don't think young people need to be convinced. I think they need to understand that it's something that's not going to go away, and it's also the profitability of it is now very real as well. So young people don't really need to be convinced. It's always the Gen X that still are quite reticent towards incorporating sustainability practices into the business.
So in a way, it's almost like at businesses receiving these, actually want to feel their passions and guide them towards the areas where they could contribute towards your sustainability agenda more than needing to convince them from the start.
I think you don't need to convince them from the start. I think if you're already subscribing to ESG principles, you will attract that kind of talent, and you will attract the good talent as well, because people who are really motivated towards this will want to work for you. I certainly currently work for a company that subscribes to all my principles, and that's why I stayed there, despite having my own company.
Yeah. Okay. So the few more, we'll just give a few more minutes for the poll to complete. In the meantime, Shakila, I remember you said like there's some companies that, you know, maybe the management is convinced, but the beyond that actually is thinking that if it's not broken, why change it? Don't change it.
Yeah.
What should you know, what happens then?
I think that's a case of I guess the management don't have a long-term plan in place. So let me tell you a client that we had, which was a plastics manufacturer, and they were doing very, very well before the pandemic hit. So this is all 2 years before the pandemic hit, and they were doing very well, but they only had a 5-year goal in place, which was profits upon profits upon profits. And then we suggested to them, why don't you start to look at reducing costs as well, looking at changing your materials, looking at your waste, reimagining your systems. And they said, why? Why should we do it? Because what we're doing works, it's giving us profit, and it's worked for us so far, you know, and they don't want to look beyond that, beyond things. Then the pandemic hit, and obviously their business boomed as well because plastic became thin, but there was a waste issue. And then there's the waste issue that they didn't really account for as well, and it could have hurt their reputation. So I didn't really go into too much, but it did hit their bottom line, and it did affect their trajectory, because they didn't account for what if there was a change in public perception, a change in needs, goods and services as well, and also what if there was a different demand that they didn't account for. So I would say that, you know, whatever that is good, don't change it, is a mentality that doesn't account for the climate crisis, because as we've seen in the last 3 years, things can change very rapidly. And when you look at ESG planning, it goes beyond 5 years. They actually tell you 5 years is your short-term goal. You need to look at the sustainability of the business beyond that, and whether it can hit on serious hits. It can survive serious hits like a pandemic.
Right. Okay. So I will, with that, I'll end the poll, as well as thanks, Shakila, for the discussion that we had here, and pass it back to the organizers. Thank you very much, everyone, for staying on with us despite us.
Thank you for staying on with us over time as well.
Okay, over back to you, Ganesh.
Thank you, Ms. Shakila and Ms. Chin, for such an in-depth and insightful sharing. And thank you to all for the wonderful participation. Let's give everyone a round of applause. I would like to take a moment to talk about our discovery call. It is basically a one-to-one consultation session where on today's topic, if you have any more question, need more clarification, or interested to know more about ESG from different aspects, you can set up a discovery call with us with Ms. Shakila and Ms. Chin to discuss further. So if you would like to set up a call, we have displayed the registration link and the QR code for you to scan on the screen. We will also provide the link in the chat for you to register for one. Let's wait a bit more for those who want to register. Again, this is for those who are interested to see how to benefit from ESG and how they can apply it to their organization, which will not just benefit the organization, but also the environment. So we strongly encourage you to register for a discovery call. Hopefully, all of you today have learned a lot from our webinar session. Now, we know this could be hard for some people, but we would like to invite all the participants to switch on your camera just for 1 minute so that we could have a group photo session together. I know some people might be shy, but don't worry about it. It is not the end of the world, and we are not going to do anything illegal whatsoever. Everyone, please smile and show your bright white teeth to us.
All right, I guess I'll say 1, 2, 3. On 3, we smile. Okay, everyone say cheese. 3, 2, 1, cheese. Okay. Right, Danish, you may continue.
Thank you, Mai, for the help. And thank you, Ms. Shakila and Ms. Chin, and thank you, audience, for your cooperation. You may now turn off your camera. Lastly, thank you all so much for joining us and for your active participation this afternoon. We hope you have enjoyed our webinar session as much as we have enjoyed hosting this webinar for you. Last and foremost, I'm aware the webinar has gone way over the specified time, but regardless, thank you all so much for sticking around and joining us this afternoon. We hope you have enjoyed our webinar session as much as we have enjoyed hosting this webinar for you. Before the session ends, once again, I will display the QR code to join in our Global Business Network group on Telegram, GBN. This is where we will post our future updates. It could be another webinar session or the latest trending news. So please do not forget to join us in the Global Business Network GBN Telegram group with the link and QR code that has been provided by our team. Once you are done, you can feel free to sign off. Thank you everyone again for your participation today and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.